Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the unofficial SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is November 20th, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP on Azure. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey. So today we again have a very special guest in our podcast. We'll talk with Niels about the cloud adoption framework. But before we go there, as always, let's quickly take a look at some of the things that happened this week. So let me again share my screen. Last week I had talked about the discussion or the interview that ASUG had with Christian Klein. And at that time, there was only the announcement and stuff like that. Now ASUG has published a blog about the 5 takeaways from the discussion with Christian. I think we covered in our last podcast already some of these questions, but I think it's still, if you hadn't a chance to watch it, then I think it's quite interesting to just read over it how Christian sees the whole customer engagements, how the focus on S4, how to focus on these topics, data, analytics, and AI, how the relationship with the hyperscalers, the topic about integration. So I think it's a interesting summary of the interview that was there. If you are an ASUG member, then you can also watch the recording. I'm actually not an ASUG member, so maybe, but Microsoft is. So maybe we need to check whether we also can subscribe and get a user here. Maybe that's an action item for me. Good, then we also released a new certified virtual machines. So obviously, you know, there's the official catalog that SAP has online, where they talk about certified infrastructure providers. And with Azure, I think we always had a pretty good catalog here with lots of interesting virtual machine types. And now we have additional E-series here available. So I think especially for the lower virtual machines or lower sized memory virtual machines, now with the E-series there, we also have a very good portfolio of virtual machines that you can choose from. So I think that's also
additional to that. You forget to mention we are talking about HANA certification.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. That's a good point. This is the HANA hardware directory, exactly. And obviously you can run a HANA environment on any virtual machine that you like, but especially when you are looking at productive workload, it's important that you have the certification from SAP. And I think that's now we have even more virtual machines.
And productive means not really only productive system, but any system as long as you need support.
Correct. If you want to create a ticket with SAP.
Exactly.
Yeah. And obviously, I mean, these E-series, they are more on the lower end. But yeah, as you can see, we obviously also have the really big virtual machines here, or machines here with 24 terabytes and the 4 terabyte virtual machines that we have. So I think we have now really a big breadth of memory available. Another thing that was released, so a blog post about the availability zones and how to select the availability zones. Listeners or viewers of our podcast or regular viewers know that we had Philipp Leitenbauer talking about this already in detail. But if you want to read up on it again, then there's now this blog post. Basically explains again what Philipp taught us. It's using the same things. It's also referencing to the GitHub repository that Philipp has available. So I think this is also a good summary if you want to look at which availability zones are best suited for your specific SAP workload. Then One other announcement that we just had, 3 days ago. So we do have Azure Backup for SAP HANA databases now for quite some time. So if you're running SAP HANA on Azure, then you don't necessarily need to have your own backup infrastructure, but you can really use Azure Backup, so a native service. And what we have now introduced in public preview is incremental backups. So it's not available in all the regions yet, but we're going to roll this out even further, obviously. So with the incremental backup, the costs of making your backups and also obviously
the speed, yeah.
Exactly, is obviously much better.
Yeah.
So if you are already using Azure Backup, then I think this is certainly something that you could check out. If you're not yet, then also give it a try, I would say.
Is there any news regarding this soft limit, what we have there on the 2 terabyte?
My understanding is there is still the limit of 2 terabytes, but it is very important, I think, to explain what that soft limit means. Does it mean that we cannot back up bigger HANA? It's just that we, from performance perspective, recommended that it's only to 2 terabyte, because then performance is actually going to be not so optimal if we have a more than 2 terabyte HANA. But we are, I think, working on the new.
But actually, that's a good point, because the incremental afterwards, after the initial one, should then definitely help.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's certified solution, which is great. I mean, from SAP, backend certified, so great.
Absolutely. And actually, I hope that in one of our next episodes, we will have colleagues from the Azure Backup for HANA team with us here on the podcast, and then obviously we can ask them all the questions and really get all the answers there, hopefully. Good. One last thing that I want to mention, and this was just released yesterday. It's a new, I don't know, is it a project or whatever, called Defend Your Data. And I think, we're all not lawyers here, so this is, we can only comment on what is published there, but obviously, especially here in Germany, there's a lot of debate about GDPR, about how customers and actually also schools and public institutions, how they can work with Azure, since Azure obviously is a public cloud owned by an US company. There are obviously a lot of questions. How does this work? How does this relate to my data and stuff like that? And now with this Defend Your Data protection, I think Microsoft made a very, very big statement again. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I cannot really judge this, but there are a few things that really stand out. And I think for me, the positive thing really is that Microsoft is really taking this very, very seriously, and that Microsoft is really addressing these concerns and not only trying to talk about and explain what is happening, but also really taking very concrete actions. So I think one thing that I found really interesting is this here: we are committed that we will challenge every government request from any government. So it's really no matter from where there might be a request, Microsoft will make this public. So we will really try to make this as transparent as we can if there are certain requests. Here we are using strong encryption. We are stand up for customer rights. We are transparent. We have a track record. So I think this is really, for me. Again, I don't know all the details what this defending your data now exactly means, and I guess you need to be a lawyer and data protection guy to really understand this. But for me, the positive thing is really that we are addressing these concerns, that we are making them transparent, that we are trying to work with the European Union, with the different governments to really make sure that the data is your data, and we really don't want to mishandle it, or whatever you might call this. there is, so there's not only this website, but there's also a Word document with additional information of what it actually means. So I think it's definitely worth to check this out and spend some time on working with this. Good. With this, I think we're ready to hand over. So Niels will talk about the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. I actually think it's a really, really interesting concept that we have there. I actually don't know how long it has been around now, but we have the expert here in the call. So with this, Niels, maybe I'll hand it over to you. Maybe you can quickly introduce yourself, and then, yeah, I'm really looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Holger. Yes, I can give a brief introduction. I'm a cloud solution architect in the Microsoft Partner Organization, and I'm normally facing topics around infrastructure, application migration, and so on and so on. And often there's the touch point to SAP when it comes to migration. So they have a handover to other colleagues which are very, very deep in these topics, like you are. And yes, Cloud Adoption Framework has been around for a little while. I think we have more than 2 years at the moment, which this product, and I call it a product, is in the market. Because let's jump in a little bit to give you a brief overview of the Cloud Adoption Framework. So what I want to share first is this is our landing page to the Cloud Adoption Framework. You have shown the site in the Azure portal, and this is our site in the documentation of the Cloud Adoption Framework. And the interesting part around this site is that we started to think more in how can we get people to understand why we developed a kind of Cloud Adoption Framework. And our idea is, and I think that's the important first sentence, is a collection of documentation, implementation guides, best practices, and tools. So we have collected all the project experience from the first cloud movements we had and projects with customers we had, and put them together and say, okay, there must be a common pattern. What is the best way to do a cloud migration or a cloud adoption? And when you step then one step back, there's an important thing to think about. And that was so fascinating for me. That's the reason why I started to dig deeper into the Cloud Adoption Framework. It is not only about a migration. It's about a digital transformation of a company. So the people are transforming their business to be more digital processes, more digital products for customers. And out of this, they need, because they are going a new way into a new area, they need a way, they need something which guide them because they don't know where to go. And that's, I think, a good point why the Cloud Adoption Framework is so successful. This is made by best practices, by experiences we had, and it talks about the cloud adoption journey, especially if you're on the way of a digital transformation.
Niels, quick question. So you mentioned in the beginning that you think of this somehow like a product, but first of all, this product is a free product, right? We don't charge anything. Cost. And the other thing that I really love about this, about the Cloud Adoption Framework, and I think you mentioned this, that it's not only addressing, well, how do I get my on-prem environment to Azure, but it really also talks about roles and responsibilities, how my role as an on-prem database admin potentially changes or evolves when I actually take the journey into the cloud. Right?
Yeah, it's not only you as a person, if you are in the role, it is for the whole organization. Mm-hmm. So if you look at our topics in the Cloud Adoption Framework, okay, get started, get understanding, but then first topic is we have to get an idea, what is your strategy? Where does your company want to go? And when we know the strategy, we can start to plan. And as you see, one of the major topics, and I just clicked there yesterday, I think, because I was in a conversation with a partner, organizational alignment and skill readiness plan for people are one of the first points to to dig deeper in if you plan your cloud adoption. So you're totally right. It's more than just a technical migration guide. It touches all important points before we really start to migrate, and that's what you see exactly on these pillars here. We go through the strategy, we look at plan, go to ready. So we are now ready to migrate something. We have, for example, a kind of landing zone where our SAP system can land. We have, for example, a good identity management strategy. We know exactly our backup policies and stuff like these. And then we can start with the migration. That's the earliest point where we can start. And what's important is my first migration might not be the SAP system. Maybe it's just a small website or something. So we go again when we migrate our first, 10 applications. We go again and look, okay, what are the next points in our strategy to achieve? What's our plan exactly? What do we have to plan when we have to go for our next application to move to the cloud? And then we go to the whole process again. So the cloud adoption framework has one character, and this character is these iterations. We go through these process of strategy, plan, ready, migrate each time again. Each time we make the next step in our cloud journey, cloud adoption, digital transformation journey. So I think that's the interesting part about the cloud adoption framework. And the other interesting, you mentioned the point of product. This is never done. We always inject more and more experience out of projects into this product. So out of SAP migrations, there will be an input in our cloud adoption framework. Out of our Windows Virtual Desktop projects which are going on, we established a new kind of landing zone, especially for Windows Virtual Desktop. If you're more heading for this, and especially as on COVID-19, it's an interesting and very oft read topic, this Windows Virtual Desktop migration. But coming back to the whole story, get starting, strategy, plan, ready. That's the classical method. Plan, build, run. We all know this, and it's a common pattern. I think what's important after migrate, the journey is not ended. We have now our workloads in the cloud, but we are have a big focus on how do we govern our workloads in the cloud and everything we put in the cloud, and how do we manage all this stuff in the cloud? Because this is something, and there I have a lot of discussion at the moment with partners, with customers in different projects. There is a mismatch. Classic IT versus cloud-orientated IT. The operational processes are not matching together. The organizational alignment is totally different. There are new processes coming up. Just think about cost management. In the past, we had a lot of budget-orientated IT cost management. And in the cloud, we are talking about consumed IT costs. We have to have a process for managing costs day by day, and not for 1 year or half year or 3 years, whatever was in the past. So I think that's interesting. And I think here you see that the cloud adoption framework brings a lot of these aspects into this journey. So it's a kind of a cookbook when you're starting your journey to the cloud, I would say.
So is this wrong if I say that everything what I have learned on premise, now I can also migrate, because most of those topics or steps are already present on premise. Yeah? So now if I want to migrate something on premise, I can use the cloud adoption framework to help me to put the cloud taste in my current environment and migrate that current environment in much more flexible and scalable way.
That's also an approach you can go. I think the cloud adoption framework, and I have to say it's cloud agnostic. It doesn't matter where you go. Even if it's your private cloud, as you mentioned, you can take this cloud adoption framework as well. And I think that's the real benefit of this product, the cloud adoption framework. And please allow me to just jump into one section. And this is something where I have a lot of conversation at the moment coming up. You see operating model, which you just ask for what will be new for the organization and for the people. And also what's very interesting is everything around the landing zones. And when I jump now into the docs, you see it's a part of our documentation, the cloud adoption framework. I think interesting to see for everybody who is around, we have a section here, what's new. You can always click on what's new. And I go there just before I go deeper into the landing zones. And you see that we are releasing in very short-term rhythm new topics into our cloud adoption framework. So it's worth to visit this page again and again to see more and more coming up what we do. But coming back to our point, let's talk about landing zones. I think it's very interesting to talk about how can we build our footprint in our new environment in the cloud. And this is where we talk about Azure Landing Zone. And I think it's a very hot topic at the moment. And maybe a question to you, if you bring your SAP landscape on Azure, you have a lot of things to discuss, not only the size of a VM or the backup for your HANA system. I think what is about networking? What's about identity management and stuff like this? I think it's always on the discussion, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes. And it's being worked on,
Yeah.
SAP specific, which is good news. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I'm waiting for the announcement that it's released, working on this topic. But I think what is in there is that it's a great guide for everybody who wants to start in the cloud. What are the topics where I have to get my mind on? Where do I have to make some discussions? And our landing zone area here in the cloud adoption framework, I think, brings a lot of help for people who are struggling on their way into the cloud. And as you see there, we're talking about what are the design areas you have to think about? How do I get my enrollment? How do I get my subscription to have some usage in Azure? How do I make my identity? How do I make my network topology? And so on and so on and so on. And I think what's important in there, and that's what was the point, what I want to make, it's not that we are just writing, you have to think about your enrollment. No, we are also telling you what is the best practice. So we bring two parts together. We talk about what is to be considered and what is our recommendation. And I think that's something that a lot of people ask for. What is the best practice for Microsoft when I go to the cloud? What are the recommendations? What should I do? Because you have made so many projects, please help me. So I think that's a good starting point out of the cloud adoption framework as well. Going in there and just read through the recommendations, and that gives you an idea to think about what will be a next good step.
And that's actually something that I can do before I even start one virtual machine in Azure. I can really, if I know, and like you said, even if I, for whatever reason, decide not to go with Azure, but if I just have a cloud journey in general, then the cloud adoption framework, at least the first chapters, provide me with a guidance on, how does the general model look like? What do I need to do? How do I plan certain things? I guess later on, it becomes really Azure specific, and we talk about Azure specific solutions and best practices. But to frame the initial discussion, it's cloud agnostic, I would assume.
Yeah, you're totally right, and I love this. If you always take one step back, we all are technical guys. So when someone comes around the corner and has a question, how could I think we all deliver technical solutions, but often, and this is what is the main in the cloud adoption framework, take one step back and go through it. Mm-hmm. Why, the strategy behind, make a plan, then get ready, and then make your adoption. And as you mentioned, I think that's it doesn't matter where you go. Always think about why, and exactly get an understanding what must I do to be able to adopt. And that's what in there. And I think, yeah, I mentioned it. You can go in there and you see it. It's all relating motivations, business outcomes, business justification. And to be honest, if you change your way as a Microsoft partner, for example, or as a customer, as a partner or customer, how you want to address your customers, I think you can go the same way. What is the strategy I'm want to achieve? Let's plan our way, get ready for it, and then start the new way or the new technology or the new product or whatever I want to deliver to my customers. So I think this is a pattern which helps always if you implement new things.
Mm-hmm. And then I see here, start with enterprise scale, start small and expand. So I think we really also address different initiatives. Maybe I'm just a smaller customer that just wants to go to Azure to expand my local data center or whatever. Then probably this section is good for me. Or whether I already know I want to have a complete data center transformation project, then this is probably enterprise scale stuff. So
that's a way of thinking about it. To say, okay, I'm a more small customer, so I have a little footprint. So maybe the basic landing zone concept will help me. I can then improve my landing zone as I go forward. Mm-hmm. That's always the idea behind finding the balance between, for example, your speed of change. How can your organizational change, a skill change of your people go in conjunction with the landing zone you need? This is one approach. So I'm just looking for the basic starting point. I can start small and gain. And my other approach is, why not starting with enterprise scale? So you're going to the cloud, even if you're a small customer and have a small environment in the cloud. These aspects here are not wrong. Maybe it's not so big to be implemented, but you can also think about these things. And I think that's one of the main benefits of cloud. Even a small company is able to achieve a higher security level. You just show the blog post about privacy and security. So I can have a better security level. Maybe I have a better network infrastructure than before. Mm-hmm. Maybe I have some small offices in Asia and US. And yes, maybe this is also for a small company interesting. So the interesting part is enterprise scale is the big approach. But if needed, you can also use it for a small company if you implement, for example, an enterprise scale. But yes, you're right. It's always the approach from starting small, as I say, start in iterations. Start with a small approach, go the next step. As you go bigger in your environment in the cloud, you need to improve your landing zone. And this is also totally right for governance. Start only with as much governance as you need in the moment. And then build out a bigger governance blueprint as you gain more workloads in the cloud. So coming back to my example from the beginning, maybe your first applications are just some small websites. So you don't have so many data constraints, data privacy constraints. You can start with a small environment. Then you bring suddenly personal data, customer data on the cloud. Mm-hmm. So you have more risk coming into your cloud environment. So your governance must be evolved or developed to the next generation. And then you start with your SAP system, bringing it to cloud. The business risk is going up again because you bring all your critical processes into the cloud. So your governance must be evolved as well. So that's always the mindset of iterations. And I think that's very interesting in our cloud adoption framework.
So if you go, sorry, go ahead.
For me, it's amazing because there's listed all the aspects from business to technology to governments, on one place. Generally you need for any kind of IT project. Cloud is of course special, then again, Azure as well. But really on one, again, it's a framework. Yeah. So you just you can easily plug in, but to have it on one place, it's really helpful. It's really helpful just to reuse it, without all of those millions topics are just consolidated into one place. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're totally right, Goran.
So if you go to the best practices down there, this is, I guess, also one area where we then have collected. You are cloud solution architects. We have lots of others working with our customers and stuff like that. So that's where we collect the feedback and then we create best practices, around storage security or database security best practices. That's where we consolidate
collect all the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
we have two ways on looking on best practices. One way is our architectural center, our architect center in our docs. I think you all have shown us there a lot of, I would say, architectural blueprints in there. And here we more have a collection of best practices. So how should you make your resources in Azure? How do you organize your resources in Azure? Or I was starting to build some network. So, okay, let's think about security, boundaries. So we are bringing all these aspects in here, and that's what we have here in the best practice area. It's not the architecture of something. It is what have we learned, and will be then the best practice out of this. I think that's the idea. Okay, how hub spoke technology is a good practice. So maybe have a look. It will look like this if you do it. And we also discussed the point of maybe you start with a hub spoke architecture, or the other approach will be leveraging Azure Virtual WAN, for example, as a other solution for your company, depending on your size, your organization, your distribution, global, and so on and so on. Yes, and you're totally right. These are a collection of best practices. What have we done in projects?
Okay. Can you now, if you go, for example, to adopt to the next section? Yeah, exactly. So there we have migrate. So there we would outline, how do I get started? How do I start a first migration? Yeah, there's the Azure migration guide. Okay, so this is also a collection basically that I then can use to use this as a jump point to how do I actually do the migration with Azure tools?
You're totally right. This is also in there. We have we have methods or methodologies in there for migration, for governance, and so on. So we have the how do I get my hands dirty part. And if you say, okay, we now want to just migrate my workload. I have it on premise and I want to have it with small adjustments in the cloud. How do I do it? So first of all, this is I have to go through strategy plan ready, have to make my mind around. Then I start, okay, now I'm ready for migration. We have cool assessments in there, small little assessments where you can through, am I really ready? I can show you some of these tools, but nevertheless, it is, you're coming to migrate. Okay, I go through the overview. What is exactly going to be
step 1, 2?
Yeah, step-by-step guide where to go. Is your landing zone ready? Okay, here you got our overview. How do we think about migration? So we've gone through plan, ready, and adopt. We are now ready for migration. And then what's very important in this picture, and I have seen a lot of projects where this was not being, I would say, implemented. We assess our workloads. Everybody is okay. We make an assessment. We know what to migrate. We go, I would say, more technical assessment. We exactly know how big our machines are. We make a good sizing and stuff like this. Then we make the migration with, for example, Azure Migration Toolkits, Site Recovery Manager, whatever. We have explanation for this. We can leverage third-party tools. That's fine. So our workloads, we have assessed them, we have migrated them, but then we are not ready. And that was a mistake in the past. I often have seen in customer situations. They put the infrastructure in the cloud, let them run the VMs, shut them down on premise, and then the cost is going up. The security doesn't fit. The networking was open, whatever. So we implemented a step, we call it release the workload. So the migration is one part, and then get it cloud ready. Make everything, the balance between price and performance, resizing of the machine, stuff like this, get security in there, get logging in there, get monitoring in there, and so on and so on. And if you're then ready with your workload, then you go for the next workload or for the next 10 machines, whatever you want to migrate, deploy it and release it. And this is our migration iteration circle, I would call it, and to go through this. And we exactly describe all these steps, and that's what's in the articles here in the chapter, where you can exactly get an understanding how our migration will go. Though we start then with the migration guide, what do we have to do, when to use this guide exactly? Okay,
Yeah.
Then I go, okay, how can I make an assessment? Which tools are there? Which are the assumption? Which scenarios do we have? What's about cost management? Then how do I deploy the workloads? Native Microsoft tools, third-party tools, any kind of other tools. Then what's important in the step of release your workload to the cloud? And then we have some assistance and stuff like this in there. And I think we have best practices as well for migration.
Cool.
How do we do it with multiple data center, multiple regions, and so on and so on. And I think here you get an understanding what exactly the value of the cloud adoption framework, the collection of all our knowledge together with a good process, a real good process.
So if I really want to be very, very structured, I would probably start reading this even before I start my cloud journey.
That's a good approach. That's a good approach. And
sure
one step back, always think why. Yeah, but I think that's the idea behind the cloud adoption framework, and we have a lot of partners in Germany which are already adopting the cloud adoption framework for their solutions and are able to help if you're on the way.
But that's actually a good point. So let's say I'm a customer that, for whatever reason, does not yet want to go into the cloud, for whatever reason, but they still could benefit from at least start reading the cloud adoption framework, just to familiarize. What changes do I need to go through? Maybe there are even some changes, especially in the organization, that I can already do without going to the cloud. So I can already adopt some of the best practices that we have collected here, so that maybe I know that in 3 years from now I will go to the cloud, but now I can already start changing the culture or some of the some of the job descriptions or whatever in my company.
Yes, you're totally right. We have a lot of approaches in there. We have, for example, a lot of discussions in there. Maybe you, in the future, if you go to the cloud, you might think about centralized IT, decentralized IT, and so on and so on. And all these topics are discussed under the organized part of the cloud adoption. We have an extra chapter only for organizational alignment. So what do we think are required functions if you go to the cloud? And then we exactly describe every of this function, what we think, what is the role of this function in your organization, and how can you make a kind of responsible metrics out of this, and so on and so on. I think, as you mentioned, it's a good prepare step. How can I prepare my organization to be ready for cloud? So that's in there, and yeah, go through it, read through it, see, okay, what are the team structures I have to have in mind? We provide some thinking about what could be the idea behind minimal viable product, what could be the first little steps so that you get a benefit out of this. How do we build technical skilling plans for my people in there? How do I do
that's actually great. Exactly. Yeah. So if I decide that I go to the cloud at some point in time, how do I actually educate or skill up my employees? Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah, we have some learning paths in there. We say, how can we do it hands-on? What is there? How can we go deeper then? And so on. And we have a lot of tools also being promoted here. You see Microsoft Learn, for example, is in there. And what are the learning paths for solution architects, for administrators, for developers, and stuff like this. So yes, that's exactly all put it together in here.
Oh, great.
And I see a lot of customer and partner going in there and ask questions. I just had, I was 2 or 3 weeks ago, someone asked me, we are going to build a cloud governance function in our organization, and we are going to do, and I said, where do you get all this information from? And then he directed me to the cloud governance function and preparing material and the benchmark and everything. And I said, oh, I have not seen it in the docs, because you talk about it, but you don't know. And it was interesting that a lot of people go through it and exactly what do I have to deliver? What is in scope? What is out of scope? What's the minimum scope of these functions? What are the preparations I can do? As you mentioned, I'm going to go into the cloud. And it was interesting to have this discussion with partners as well as with customers. So in my opinion, I think it's worth, even if you just think about your SAP system to be migrated, make one step back, have a little look at the cloud adoption framework. And I think there's a lot of topics and a lot of content which helps on your cloud adoption journey.
You're on mute, Carl.
Thank you. So basically,
you're on mute.
yeah. I mean, even without deep dive SAP specific stuff, you could use the current version for the SAP migration as well, because I mean, you need them.
Totally.
Well, I would say, I mean, there are a lot of common things. I mean, security, or probably also how do I set up my resource groups or some policies associated to it. I definitely think there's a lot of stuff that is probably common. I mean, especially when we come to migrate, for example, I don't think we would use standard Azure tools to do an SAP migration, but there was even a section about third-party tools or something like that. So,
Yes.
so maybe that's exactly where we would say, well, you would use HANA system replication, or you would use DMO in an SAP specific scenario. But I guess you still can leverage a lot of surrounding stuff to make sure that you have the processes in place, that you have your people skilled, that you have the governance in place. So I think, yeah, even without SAP, I guess this is quite useful.
So one question, probably when people are researching all those and browsing our documentation, probably they will sometimes go in direction of a well-architected framework. Can you tell us, Niels, what is that?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I would try to explain it a little bit different. The cloud adoption framework is all about how will your organization and your overall landing in the cloud will look like. Your network design, your policies you mentioned, your security, everything around the overall picture, the landing zone, we call it. And then we come to a point where we are going to migrate workloads. Application A, application B, and so on and so on. And then we're coming up with the next kind of questions we have to ask. How do I exactly build my application in the cloud to be secure, reliable, performant, cost sensitive, and so on and so on? And that's exactly the scope of well-architected framework. So we are leaving the overall view of the landing zone and go one step deeper and look at the concrete workload we are going to migrate. And that's why these two, I would say, these two things are so near together. You need the landing zone to bring your workload in, and if your workload is in, you have to have the well-architected framework. So well-architected framework is the best practice for an application, and cloud adoption framework is the best practice for your way into the cloud. Mm-hmm. Maybe this clarifies the difference, and it's a good question. It's often asked.
Sure, thank you.
Great. I think that's already a really good overview of the or introduction in the cloud adoption framework, and I think you made it quite interesting so that people will take a first look and go through it.
So if you can go to channel 9. There's a new channel 9 video series around cloud adoption framework and also well-architected framework, and it's very nice. Going into I can send you the link in the chat.
I know I've seen it. It's coming up, and here we go. We also have these overview about cloud adoption framework. It's just released, I think, yesterday.
Exactly.
And there you can start your journey with the cloud adoption framework, and then there are a lot of videos around cloud adoption framework, enterprise scale, well architected. They are all you see. They are all coming up here. If you're in this area, we can share this link.
Great. Yeah.
That's great content. It's always good to listen to. And you see this overview is just 3 days ago.
Cool. Yeah.
Good.
Great.
I think that's really a good overview, a good start. Thank you very much, Niels.
You're warm welcome.
Again, I hope that a lot of listeners or viewers will take a closer look at the Cloud Adoption Framework. Even if you're not working on Azure yet, this will help you frame a good setup for working in the cloud. Good. So with this, thank you. I guess we're at the end. Thanks.
Thank you for having me. I think SAP and I'm in. Yeah.
Perfect. Good. So with this, thanks a lot, and we'll see each other next week.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.